As it grows in the womb, the human brain repeats many of the stages of its ancestral past. Ancient systems, such as those important for smell and for primitive movements, develop first. But growth of the three initially equal parts, the future forebrain, midbrain, and hindbrain, is soon dominated by the enormous development of the folded mantle called the cerebral cortex. The average adult brain weighs about 1,450 grams, only 2% of total body weight. Within this tiny proportion, and within the cerebral cortex in particular, reside the essential human qualities of man. If the brain is destroyed, the rest of the body is practically useless. Although its outer surface is heaved into complex lobes and folds, its cut surface is gelatinous and at first sight quite amorphous. Yet the brain is astounding in its complexity. Each of its 14,000 million neurons is capable of connecting with up to 4,000 others, thousands of times every second. Neurons are excitable cells which transmit information by means of rapid changes in the permeability of their cell membranes. There are three types. Receptor neurons, such as this olfactory receptor, receive stimuli, in this case chemical, and transduce them to impulses. Interneurons carry and integrate these impulses, and the third type, effector neurons, evoke responses. These nerve endings cause the blood vessels beneath to constrict, for example, and these motor end plates, the terminals of motor neurons, bring about the contraction of muscle fibers. Each neuron has a cell body from which project dendrites, carrying impulses towards it, and an axon carrying impulses from it. Some axons are almost a meter long, stretching, for example, from the cerebral cortex to the end of the spinal cord. Bundles of axons, such as these, form nerve fibers. In unipolar neurons, there is a single extension from the cell body which divides into an axon and dendrites. Bipolar neurons have an extension from each pole. Most of the neurons in the brain and spinal cord are multipolar. Neurons communicate with each other at junctions called synapses. Transmission across the synaptic cleft is usually chemical, through neurotransmitter substances stored in vesicles in the presynaptic terminal. Arrival of an impulse here releases the transmitter to diffuse across the cleft to the postsynaptic membrane. Here it may have an excitatory effect, generating an impulse in the second neuron, or an inhibitory effect, rendering the postsynaptic membrane less excitable to other stimuli. About half the total volume of the brain and spinal cord is formed by non-excitable cells called neuroglia. Up to 10 times more numerous than neurons, they are the most common origin of cerebral tumors. There are 4 main types: astrocytes, oligodendrocytes, microglia, and ependyma. Astrocytes have small cell bodies with many processes. As well as supporting the neurons they surround, they may act as physical and chemical insulators by enclosing synapses and controlling the spread of neurotransmitter substances. Even smaller are oligodendrocytes, which manufacture myelin. Microglial cells, the smallest neuroglial cells, resemble monocytes. They become active only when nervous tissue is damaged. Ependymal cells line the cavities of the brain and spinal cord. The brain and the spinal cord form the central nervous system. In the brain, the cut surface of fixed nerve tissue appears gray on the outside and white on the inside. In the spinal cord, their positions are reversed. Gray matter consists of cell bodies and adjacent portions of their processes embedded in neuroglia and blood vessels. In white matter, neuroglia surround groups of axons bundled together to form nerve fibers. Fibers which carry impulses towards the central nervous system are afferent. Efferent fibers carry impulses in the opposite direction. The brain has 3 regions: the forebrain, the midbrain, and the hindbrain. Running through them is an interconnected system of fluid-filled spaces called the ventricles. The lateral ventricles are connected by the interventricular foramen to the third ventricle, and the third to the fourth by the cerebral aqueduct. The fourth ventricle is continuous with the central canal of the spinal cord. The forebrain consists of a central diencephalon and the cerebral hemispheres. Partially separated by the longitudinal cerebral fissure, they form the largest part of the brain. Each so-called hemisphere is in fact half a hemisphere. It consists of the basal nuclei, an inner mass of white matter, and an outer layer of gray matter, the cerebral cortex.